you guys for joining us. It's fun to see, like I said, some familiar faces on the call. My name's Kevin Pappas. I'm the training manager at 1OC. I see a good amount of familiar faces, but to those of you that I haven't met, it's nice to meet all of you, and thanks for joining us. And we're really excited to be continuing our Meet the Funder series. You guys have probably attended these events in the past, and normally they would be in our training room, and we'd have some time for meet and greet and for coffee and a little more of an extended session. But today we're keeping it to about an hour, just for, we know everyone's busy and has lots of meetings, but we still really wanted to prioritize this because we recognize there's just such a need, to get many of your guys' questions answered and just to continue to build relationships with foundations in the Orange County community. So yeah, we're really excited to have Tennyson Euler and Terry Sagata from Pacific Life Foundation who will be sharing today. Tennyson's actually a board member of 1OC, so it's exciting to have someone from the 1OC family just being a part of what's going on and sharing about his role over at Pacific Life as he oversees the foundation. And we also have Taryn Palumbo, who's the executive director of Orange County Grantmakers, and she'll be narrating our conversation today and really posing some questions to Tennyson. Then we'll be opening up a time for Q&A for you guys today. So just a brief overview. Tennyson will be providing, some context for Pacific Life as a foundation, their initiatives in the community, a brief overview of their funding areas, and really what Pacific Life is all about. And then, giving kind of a high level overview of how their strategy and approach to funding has really adjusted during the time of COVID-19, funding priorities and, where they're going moving forward. And so we do want to open it up for a time at the end, though, for you guys to ask your questions. This is a resource for you guys to get exposure to Pacific Life and meet the source here. And so feel free to, as you think of questions throughout the session, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And Taryn and myself will be looking at those, and we can definitely do our best to get through as many as possible during the Q&A session. A few just tidbits from 1OC that I wanted to make you aware of, as many of you guys are 1OC members. We've actually recently fully redone our 1OC membership to include a lot of cool new events and training opportunities like the one you're on today. So most of you had emailed us, this is actually a free event for our 1OC members. And we also have some other webinars we do in partnership with AFP. There's one every second Friday of the month. And those are a couple of our free trainings. And we also just created a membership support network that I'm going to put in the chat that we'd love for you guys to get on, because that's where we're really going to be communicating moving forward. Tons of free different opportunities like this and events for you guys to attend. So I'll put that in the chat box, and go ahead and just connect. It's on a great new platform, super modern, easy. And it's kind of like a Facebook layout. We send updates where you can sign up for different events or training programs like we have going on today. So I'll put that in the chat box for you as well. And then we also, I wanted to make you guys aware, we have a new virtual, keyword these days, training library that includes a bunch of sessions that we've done over the last couple of years that have been recorded, that is also available to our members. So I'll put all that info in the chat box, but just wanted to make you guys aware of that, as many of you guys are 1OC members, and let you know about some of the new opportunities we have going on as an organization, because we really adjusted that and kind of bolstered up those benefits to accommodate everything that's now in a virtual format for you guys. So I will put those links there. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to put those in the chat box. General rule of thumb, you guys, everyone's pretty well acquainted with Zoom at this point, but if you're not speaking, do your best just to keep yourself muted. No problem if, kids or dogs or animals come in the background. We know everyone's got a lot going on, and most of us are working from home, but yeah, go ahead and keep yourself muted. And then, yeah, the session should go for about an hour. Like I said, we'll do kind of brief introduction of Pacific Life and then really have the bulk of the time for questions. So I'm going to pass it off to Taryn, who's going to give a brief introduction and share a little bit about OCG. And then we'll go ahead and jump in with Pacific Life.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Taryn Palumbo. I'm the Executive Director of Orange County Grantmakers. It's great to see so many faces this morning. I wish we were in person, but hey, this is a good substitution. For those of you who are not familiar with OCG, we are a membership association of funders and philanthropists here in Orange County. So we represent some of the largest corporate, private, and family foundations here. Our job is to really convene and provide education and learning and advocacy around issues that are important to the philanthropic space. One of our big areas over the last year has been equity, and I hope that many of you have already signed up for the upcoming summit we have in October. Every year, Orange County Grantmakers puts on a summit for nonprofit leaders. Usually it's one day at the Delhi Center. This year, because we don't want to completely exhaust people over Zoom, we've split it up over 4 days in October. But the summit is for nonprofit leaders. It's $30 for 4 days, 4 keynotes, 12 breakout sessions. And we're focused all around equity. So different aspects of it, including innovation in a time of crisis, public policy, racial and social justice, and recovery and resiliency of Orange County. And the speakers that we have lined up, they're local. There are some, representing our local nonprofits here. We have Don Reese from The Wooden Floor, Harold Herman from Second Harvest, Bill Bracken from Bracken's Kitchen. And then we also have some really amazing keynote speakers as well. We've got Vu Le, who's a very, very funny nonprofit writer. If anyone's familiar with the blog Nonprofit AF, you can interpret what that stands for. That's his choosing of the blog name. We have Kathleen Kelly-Janis with the Governor's Office. We have Wes Moore with the Robin Hood Foundation, and we have a panel, fireside chat around social and racial justice with Ruha Benjamin, who's an author and professor out of Princeton, Dean Song Richardson with UCI Law, and Nicole Chiazzolo, who's the head of Black Lives Matter New York. So, our goal is to not only provide learning and convening for the funders, but to make sure that we're having a lot of opportunity for conversation and dialogue with the nonprofit community. And this is sort of the pinnacle of our efforts and programming throughout the year. So if you have not already, go to the website. Again, it's $30 for everything. Oh, and you get a swag box. Who doesn't love a swag box? So I hope everyone is able to join. We're so happy to be partnering with 10C today. Again, as I mentioned, we really want to connect and hear what is important to the nonprofit community on the ground, because that helps to inform the conversations that the funders are having in our meetings as well. And this is a wonderful chance for us to really have that important dialogue back and forth. So Pacific Life is one of our members. We are so thrilled that they were willing to participate today. As Kevin shared, we have Terry Segarra and Tennyson on the call, and I will now pass the floor to Tennyson, who can do an intro of him, his background, and then we'll launch straight into their initial presentation. We can go from questions to there. So with that, Tennyson, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Taryn. Excited to be here with you. I wish we were in person. I much prefer being in person and having it be collaborative and to have us have a conversation instead of it be a presentation. So I'd encourage you to submit questions. If something's really exciting or you want to ask a question during the presentation, I don't mind being interrupted. So feel free to speak up and do that, and excited to be with you here today. We are proud supporters of both the Orange County Grantmakers and 10C. We sponsor the Spirit of Volunteerism event. We are helping sponsor the Diversity Summit. So really want those activities to be useful for our nonprofit community. Just really quickly about me, I'm a local. I grew up in Newport Beach. I'm very invested in the Orange County community. I live in Irvine, have 3 kids going to the Irvine School District. So I really have a strong desire to see this community thrive. The Newport Beach headquarters are also, our headquarters are located in Newport Beach, and we have over 2,000 employees in the Orange County area. So it's our largest population base for our employees, and we really want to kind of be able to give back to the communities where employees live and work. And in essence, that is what our mission is as a foundation of a corporate entity. Our goal is to invest and improve the communities where employees live and work. So a lot of that is here in Orange County. We also have offices in Omaha, Nebraska, and Virginia. And one of the things that's been interesting is before 2005, we were solely based in Orange County. So all of our funding, all of our efforts was local. But now we are having to figure out, or over the last 15 years, how do we engage in a more national giving commitment? How do we engage in other communities where Teddy and I don't live in Omaha or Virginia? How do we understand and know what's going on in those local communities? So as a foundation, we're evolving as well, trying to be able to adapt to that changing environment and the changing needs and the different needs that are in each community. If any of you subscribe to the Orange County Business Journal, there was an article out this week about the largest corporate foundations in Orange County. Pacific Life is consistently at the top of that list. We're number one at about $4.5 million giving to the Orange County community, and partly because it's our philosophy of giving back to the communities where our employees live and work. And one advantage of our foundation that I really appreciate about our company, and kind of while I'm going through this, if you can pull up the slides, is that we have the advantage of having a pretty large trust. We aren't beholden to, I'm going to close my chat window here. We're not beholden to kind of the rise and fall of fortunes of our nonprofits. Or of our company. So if we have a bad year, we have a trust that allows us to be able to continue funding at the levels that we want to fund at. So in a year like this year, or in a year like 2008 or 2009, the Pacific Life Foundation has a commitment to never decrease its funding from the previous year. So our plan is at $7.25 million this year. Next year, it'll be $7.25 million or more, because we have the ability to fall back on our investments in the trust and not rely on a pass-through from our corporate entity. So with that, we'll go to number 2 here, which lists just kind of where we give and how much we give. What I mentioned about our trust is down there at the bottom right at about $113 million. So it gives us a really nice cushion to not have to rely on our company. But as you can see, we don't have a specific focus area. As a company, we've made the choice to not have a signature program where we give most of our money that some other kind of local corporate foundations have done. And part of that is because we believe that kind of a rising tide lifts all boats. So if we can help spread our funding among a variety of nonprofits in our local community, we believe that the community can grow and improve from that funding instead of being solely focused on 1 or 2 areas that might be of more interest to Pacific Life. You can see naturally in Orange County where our funding lies is in health and human services and education, and that just is just a natural cause of how we do our funding, the types of applications that come in, and where we see the most need in the community happening there. If you can go to the next page here, we have 4 categories that we focus on, and I'll just touch on a couple of those. The investing in our community, that's what I've been talking about, is kind of the rising tide lifting all boats. This is when we have our annual grant application cycle. Every year we get about 450 applications that come in that we then have to decide, and can only fund about 50% of those applications on a given basis. But that's how we kind of spread the money out among all of our geographic areas to be able to help support those in the community. We then have a focus on the environment, and a reason for that is, one, where we're based, local in Newport Beach and close to the oceans. But as you can see on the back of my screen, if I go this way here, we're proud to have the humpback whale as our brand icon. And we use them in our national television advertising, in all of our marketing campaigns. It's a way for us to be able to help stand out among other insurance companies. And we want to be able to give back to that icon for what it's done for us and be supportive of that. So we have dedicated at least $500,000 every year that goes towards ocean health and marine mammal related causes. Because we do get emails on a regular basis of, I love your commercials, or I love the humpback whale, but what are you doing for them? And so that type of funding allows us to be able to go back, and every single time we get a response back that's appreciative of, wow, thank you for putting kind of your money where your mouth is to be able to support your brand icon. The third area is our supporting employees, and this is where we've grown over the last 5 years. This is our matching gift programs, our United Way campaigns, our support of local K through 12 schools. We probably our most popular program among our employees is what we call the 3Ts of Education program, where we do a survey every September of our employees, ask them to tell us where their kids or grandkids go to school. And then based on a formula, we proactively contact those principals in January, ask them to pick where they want a set amount of funding to go at their school, whether it's the 3Ts stand for teacher training, technology, or textbooks. And the principals pick where they want those funds to go. Our employees pick up the actual checks and hand deliver them to those schools. And we give out almost about $600,000 a year to local K through 12 schools, about 170 schools. So thrilled about that, partly because we have employee engagement, being able to actually take some of the foundation money and hand it in person, and it's going to an entity that is near and dear to their heart because it's affecting their family. So really, really proud of that program. That program's been going on for almost 20 years. And finally, we have our mobilizing our workforce. And I know we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but those that have been involved with our foundation, you know, our Pacific Life Good Guys, they're out there, been out there since 1985. They are out doing activities every single week, multiple events on weekends, trying to be able to support nonprofits in a non-financial way, but more from a time perspective. We'll talk about how COVID has impacted that program in a couple of slides. But we also have started also growing our service projects on site. So something that's been really neat over the last many years is bringing service projects on site. We bring in and out trucks, and we have all of our employees doing service projects together. And so there's a lot about employee engagement and helping them be excited about that. You can go to the next slide. And this is just talks a little bit about kind of where some of our major grants, where most of our grant funding resides in the $5,000 to $15,000 range. Again, it's got that idea of spreading out our support to multiple nonprofits. We are able to help support some nonprofits in larger funding. You can see where we've been at from whether it's Chalk Hospital, the Boys and Girls Club, American Cancer Society, disaster relief, the food banks. And so we're able to kind of help support these initiatives with larger capital grants and really be able to make the difference. And something that we're trying to do better at is we have about $70 billion of our own investments. And how do we make a change in the environment? And how do we make a change in social issues through the power of our investing arm? And so we are doing better at figuring out how we do socially responsible investing. And you can see that we have, almost $7 billion categorized into that type of category, whether it's clean energy or solar or focusing on other socially responsible efforts. And we're going to continue to increase the funding there. Next slide. This is, I talked about a little bit, this is our most visible in the community with our blue shirts and the Good Guys, but you can just kind of see how many nonprofits we're able to support, how many volunteer projects, 280 volunteer projects. Most of those are actually here in Orange County. So we really are on a weekly basis out there and helping support not only through our own employees, but we encourage our employees to bring their family and friends to our events and be able to contribute. So almost about 13,000 hours as of last year. And now let's get to COVID a little bit, onto the next slide. So that we did a couple of very quick things when COVID happened back in March. You can see this on the far left-hand side. Our annual giving through our grant application program is about $2.1 million. So we proactively sent out an email to all of the nonprofits that received grants from us in 2020. Our grants go out in January to those programs, and told them that they could change from a designated kind of, we like to fund programs and projects, but they could change from that designation to general operating expenses if they needed to have the access to that cash. And you can kind of see down at the bottom, out of 213 nonprofits, 171 responded. 88 of those said, nope, we're fine, no change. But 73 asked to change to general operating. and then a couple of others, a couple other categories there. So we're really proud that we were able to do that within like a day of saying, hey, we're going to decide to do this, and that email went out. And then I took the opportunity to send the email out to my other funder peers through the Orange County Grant Makers, encouraging them to do the same, because we really felt we didn't want to be locking up this money when there was going to be greater need in other programs, or a greater need for people to, for nonprofits to save jobs, or to be able to keep with their current expenses. And so the last thing we want to see is an organization struggling to perform their services because they can't pay the electric bill. So we're proud of what happened there. And then we went through and found $1.7 million in our budget for the 2020 year to designate towards COVID relief. And we did some very rapid response grants through United Way local programs and through local food banks in Orange County, Omaha, and Virginia, getting that money out in March as well. Then something that we were, maybe from my side of things, I was thrilled and not thrilled because it cost us a lot of money, but we were thrilled to do it, as we did a Giving Tuesday. It's this in this white column here, where we encouraged our employees to give back to nonprofits on a particular day. And we did a 2-for-1 match. Our normal matching gift philosophy is 1-for-1, up to $2,500 per year. This one we did 2-for-1 with no limit. And so we really wanted to engage our employees to give back to nonprofits and to really put their money behind their support, and then that we would support them doubly. So you can see we had 276 employees take advantage of that, affecting 412 charities. They gave about $265,000, which means we had to give $530,000 in matching grants. And I laugh about it, but I'm thrilled that we were able to do that because our employees really stepped up to the challenge and wanted to give. And then finally, on the far right-hand side, we've done some service projects. One of the things about COVID, we've been out of the office since the middle of March, so we're coming up on 6 months now. How do we engage our employees that are now a remote virtual workforce? Out of 98% of our employees, out of 3,500 employees, are home working. We only have a very, very small amount of employees in our main offices doing some critical business functions, but everyone else is working from home. And if one of our philosophies has been about employee engagement and involving them in our foundation giving and our community giving, how do we engage them in that type of environment? And it's been a learning experience for us to figure that out. I can no longer bring in and out trucks and have employees celebrate together of a day of service because we're not together. But we've been able to have some opportunities to promote virtual or volunteering on an individual basis. We've put up opportunities on our intranet, which is called Splash. We've done a letter writing project to first responders. We did a project with Soap Saves Lives where they got a kit at home and they were able to, together with their family, be able to put together kits for homeless families that went to Homemade Orange County. Those boxes went, and so totaling 500 boxes in kind of a 2-day effort. So it was really neat to be able to kind of do that type of project. When I think about COVID, it's trying to figure out that this isn't going away and for any time soon. And we're actually going to be redoing our offices from a construction perspective. And so our employees in Orange County are out of the office for longer than they ever expected when we left in March. And so we will have to be adapting over the coming year to figure out how do we continue to engage our employees through our community efforts, and it's something that Teddy and I are working on to do. But from a COVID perspective, is we have had to cancel all of our Good Guys volunteer efforts since March. We know that there's some companies that have allowed their employees and encouraged their employees to go out and volunteer. We've taken a more conservative approach where we've felt that if we can't allow them back in our offices because we don't feel it's safe, we don't feel right encouraging them to go out as a group in a community to volunteer. But the moment we feel like we can open up our offices and allow employees back into our offices, that's when we'll kickstart our Good Guys programs again and be able to be out there and support. Luckily, that decline in Good Guys services also matched the decline in in-person events that you as nonprofits were holding. No galas were happening, no fundraisers were happening, or outside events were happening, which is where a lot of our Good Guys volunteer efforts happen. But we want to be able to get them back out in the community and do that. So that's kind of just the general overview. I think there's one last slide there. This is happening. We've just closed our annual grant cycle, but so you can kind of get it on your notes for next year. It's the same every year, where we have a grant program open July 15th to August 15th, where our nonprofits can apply. We make those designations and send out pledge letters in November, and then make the grants in January. So for those that applied, I'm looking forward to reviewing all of those applications. For those that didn't, get that on your calendar for next year, and I look forward to learning more about your nonprofit. With that, I'll turn the time over to Taryn for us to have a conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Tennyson. So please, if you haven't already, I see there's 2 questions in the chat, but if you haven't already, please submit and I'll try and get to them. So let's start. And I see there's a question in here already. How does an organization like Pacific Life approach, the volunteer opportunities? And if you're a nonprofit, how would a nonprofit approach Pacific Life to engage your employees in that? And then I'm going to add on a little bit with the caveat of it is COVID. And as you just shared, virtual projects are sort of the world we live in today. So what are some of the things you're looking for in terms of what makes a truly engaging virtual project that a nonprofit could potentially align or show or demonstrate and be a really good place and platform for your employees to come together when we're all apart?
Yeah. It's a very good question, and I don't have a very good answer to it. And part of it is because there's so many changes going on, and so many unknowns that are happening with COVID. It's hard for us to be able to kind of land on what might be the best project or the best way to engage our employees. Partly because our employees are being asked to do a lot while working at home. They are I got 3 kids doing virtual school at home right now. And so we're getting pulled in multiple directions as employees, not only having to do our regular jobs, but also to kind of take care of our families in this current environment. And so we've been, I guess you could say, reluctant is not the right word, but we haven't moved as fast in trying to promote opportunities for our employees to be out volunteering, partly because of the concern around COVID, but partly because we just know that there's a lot on their plate. But there's a couple of things that we're doing. We're launching a virtual blood drive campaign. We normally have the American Red Cross blood drive in our parking lot, and they'd come into our buildings and we'd do these blood drives on a regular basis. Well, we're going to encourage and send out information about where our employees can find a local blood drive in their local community for them to go do on their own time and participate. So trying to provide them structure and flexibility and guidance without having it being created as a program. But I think for the time period, for the time being, while COVID is in flux, we're not really able to kind of say, hey, this is what we're looking for, an opportunity to virtually mentor 10 people. Partly is because we just don't have the capacity to manage those types of programs. Our community relations team is a very small team. Beyond myself, which I don't get to spend a lot of time on the community relations side, but there's only three employees that are managing our community relations efforts across the nation. And so every single time a new program gets started, it takes a lot of time and coordination around that. So, but if you have a fabulous program that you've developed as a nonprofit and that says, this is a way to engage a lot of employees together at one time, those are the types of projects that I think we're leaning a little bit more to, where we can engage a larger set of employees. Come 2021, we do have to relook at our strategy because, as I said, we're not going to have our employees back in the office. We're not going to be able to do these large employee activities together. So we do want to be able to find more opportunities where we can encourage our our employees to go find individual opportunities or to volunteer as departments or small teams in a nonprofit activity. And so we're kind of putting together that strategy right now.
Great, thank you. And a question from the chat. As a nonprofit with employees in Orange County that does work internationally, are there any opportunities to work with Pacific Life since your focus is really where your 3 headquarters are?
Yeah, we do have an international business. We have about almost 700 employees internationally, and they're based in Southeast Asia, in the UK, and in Australia. But they do their own programs, and we've left them to kind of be pretty independent from what we do as a foundation. From a foundation perspective, with us being a U.S.-based foundation, we can't give to we haven't set up the mechanisms to allow us to give internationally. And so our focus right now is still on our 3 main local areas. One of our strategies for next year has to be able to figure out, we are a national company. We aren't, our clients, our policyholders of our company don't just come from Orange County, Omaha, and Virginia. They come from all over. And so one of the things that we have to figure out as a company is how do we support those communities where our policyholders live, or interests that our policyholders might have and benefit from. And so that is still a work in progress. But from an application perspective, we are looking for those nonprofits that are just serving those main communities.
Great, thank you. Keeping on this vein of volunteering and virtual opportunities, if an organization has an opportunity, is there a volunteer portal or a website? How would they go about actually presenting that volunteer opportunity to Pacific Life for consideration?
There on our website, there's an email address that someone can email if they go onto our volunteering section. And their nonprofit can click on that, and we have a form that they fill out that tells what they are interested in proposing. As you saw with our Good Guys activities, at over 280 events, I think it was. That equates to quite a number of events on a weekly basis. So when COVID is resolved, we have a very strong employee-based leadership team that does our Good Guys volunteering efforts. And they do it because they are passionate about it. It's not part of their jobs. They choose to serve on the leadership council, and they're the ones that take the leads on deciding what nonprofit events to handle and what capacity they can manage it at. And then we go about helping them recruit employees to participate in those events. But I think during the summer last year, we might have had 3 or 4 or 5 Good Guys activities going on one weekend. Because of the support and the desire and passion that they have. So you can fill out the form, we'll collect it, and then that council reviews it. And once we're back up and running, then we're able to kind of reach out and say whether we have the capacity to support.
Great. So you've talked about the fact that you have a very small team, which is very common. We know a lot of the corporate funders that are part of OCG also have small teams that manage huge amounts of money. So between the 400 grant applications and all of the different volunteer opportunities, how do you handle kind of the influx and understanding and deciding who you're going to fund or who you're going to engage with? Is there a way that a nonprofit can improve their grant writing efforts or really kind of make their application shine when you're looking at them for consideration?
Yeah, I would say one of the best things that's happened over the last few years is us moving to an electronic-based submission form. It used to be we would receive large packets with lots of binder clips and lots of paper, and then we'd have to sit in a conference room over a week to go through all of these applications, and it was just pretty unmanageable. And now we have it in a workflow system with Blackbaud, and a lot of nonprofits use this Blackbaud system for a lot of other applications. And so we did that in a way so it helped streamline the effort from the nonprofit's perspective, but also helped streamline it for us on the back end from a review process to be able to look. I would say things that help a nonprofit stand out is, first of all, meeting our guidelines. And we have a lot of guidelines that are on there. And we, no matter what we say in our guidelines, we still receive requests from South Dakota or from Texas for programs in their backyard. And those are just automatic no's because our guidelines are you have to be providing services in the Southern California, Omaha, Nebraska, or Lynchburg, Virginia areas, and those are the ones that we can consider. But I think what's the strongest way of getting your mission across is we look for nonprofits that are serving a broad audience. We want a nonprofit that's out there in the community and doing that. So it's a little, I would say, in the COVID environment, as we've been going through the applications in the most recent process, it's a little harder to fund I'm not picking on any nonprofits, because I think all are good and all serve a purpose. But when there's a dire need for food security, or a concern about people losing their homes, or healthcare access, when there's a bad economy and people are really struggling, it's a little harder to fund a program around dance. I'll just put that out there, because it's just the current environment. It just naturally, from an emotional perspective, we tend to go more towards what that current need is. But we do try and find a balance. We won't do all food security, or we aren't going to just focus in. We have a very broad outreach, and we will still fund museums and libraries and art programs, because they're still important. But there might be a subtle shift this year compared to the last few years, just because of the perceived need in our communities due to COVID.
That makes sense. So, that's a conversation that is happening, a lot amongst the funder community in general, is this conversation about how do you balance the needs in the community with the funding that's available to make sure that we're supporting the nonprofits, but also meeting whatever, those essential services that are in our community right now. So you mentioned briefly, what you guys did in terms of the immediate response to COVID. I know that your next round of funding is not going to be until July of next year, so you may not have all this information yet, but has Pacific Life begun to think about, now that COVID is no longer a 3-month, 6-month challenge, but a year, 2-year challenge, what the long-term support for COVID looks like in terms of your general granting or your response to it?
Yeah. Well, let me just put out there is that 2020 sucks. Right? It's just not COVID. We got disaster. We got hurricanes going on in Louisiana where we need to support. We have fires going on, and part of my role is to figure out, well, when do I make some funding or disaster funding, or when do I hold on to some, because I just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, or even this afternoon. And that's part of that unknown is, when you have COVID, it's not just COVID, it's all of the economic realities associated with COVID and what is happening. And where we saw so many jobs being lost, and still that are going to be lost. And now it's moving up into more white collar jobs and professional businesses, where they're realizing, COVID isn't a 3-month issue, it's a 1 or 2 year issue. And what's the impact on that? We realize there's a significant impact on our nonprofits. You can't hold your galas, you can't hold your major fundraising events. You've had to adapt or incur significant costs to be able to change your programming. I feel for a lot of our nonprofits that are those brick and mortar support services, where a lot of their income comes from tickets, whether it's like the Discovery Cube or Bowers Museum, or even the Orange County Performing Arts Center, which is a nonprofit, where a lot of their revenue and ability to support community efforts comes from what the community pays to be able to come in. I'm not sure that's coming back anytime soon. And so I think when we think about programming, so we have a year, only about $2 million of that comes from a campaign. We have matching gifts. We have a lot of other programs that we will designate some funding for support. And so we might have a COVID budget next year, similar to what we developed this year. We're going to have a diversity and inclusion and equity budget for next year that we've never had before, because of what's going on in our communities and helping support those efforts. And that's not funding that a nonprofit can apply for. It's funding that we will look at what's the need in the community and what's our need from a company perspective of being involved and making decisions that way. So I don't think it's going away, but one of the nice things, as I mentioned at the very beginning with our foundation, is our funding is also not going away. It's been hard to read some of the grant applications that we've read, and one of our questions is, who are your committed funders for your program? And we're reading in there is we used to have this funding, but it's been put on hold. It's been we don't have access to these funds anymore because the funder has not released the funding, and I see that as an issue, and so I want our foundation to never have to do that, to be able to fulfill our commitments that we make and to support those entities.
You mentioned a commitment next year to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. A question from Alex Cerna, hi, who's actually one of our equity speakers at our summit in October. What does that look like? If you have any other details you can share, obviously, with the world we are in today and the conversation that's happening nationally, I think equity and racial justice has become so much more prominent and something that people are willing to discuss now than ever before. And I know, OCG is looking at how do we capitalize on some of that energy right now. So how is that playing into what your work is going to be looking like and your funding is going to be looking like in 2021?
Yeah, it's to be determined. Our company has created what we're calling an inclusion council, which is a collection of employees who represent a variety of interests and a variety of areas, and also have expressed a desire to participate on that committee. And they're going to be the ones that are going to come up with a 3-year roadmap of how we as a company want to address those issues, both internally, but also how we want to be perceived externally. And so some of our funding is going to go to support those efforts that might be determined. And so I don't have an answer to that yet because that Inclusion Council is still working on it. I would say one of the things we have to figure out is how much is a local contribution and how much is a national type of contribution. As I mentioned earlier, that's the struggle we have being a local company, but also, we're number 269 on the Fortune 500. And clients and financial professionals in every state and practically almost probably every county. And so how do we as a company kind of manage between our national needs of being visible and helping make change while also doing it at a local basis? So stay tuned for more on that.
That's great. Well, it's just wonderful that it's something that's being looked at and discussed because it's so important today. Are there any questions, any more questions from the audience? I think we covered everything that was in my agenda of questions I wanted to ask. Let's see, do you have a fair or other opportunities for employees to learn about nonprofits they can support?
In the past, we've done a United Way campaign, and we're still doing one now, but it's all virtually. But as part of the United Way campaign, United Way would bring in 8 or 10 nonprofits with booths, and it would be like a carnival type fair. This year we won't be doing that, but in future years we will. One of the concerns that I have is kind of helping lead these efforts is I want employees to feel like they have flexibility and choice, and that they aren't being driven to one nonprofit that a company says, this is our preferred nonprofit. So we've tried to stay away from having kind of preferential or preferred nonprofits. So even in our United Way kind of fairs that we've done over the years, we've made sure that we've had a good balance and haven't done a lot of repeats of nonprofits because we want to be able to introduce our employees to a broad array. Through our matching gift program in Blackbaud, they have access to it. It pulls the database from the IRS system. And so all eligible nonprofits show up in the system, and that if they're looking to make a grant, they can do that. And we try and be pretty broad and flexible with our matching gift program. One of the questions we consistently get a lot about is how do I get an employee of Pacific Life involved, either on my board or involved in my organization? We don't at the moment have an employee placement program with nonprofits. And again, it kind of goes back to that philosophy. And I have a strong philosophy of I want an employee to serve on a board because they're passionate about the issue. They're going to be your best board member. You're not going to get a great board member if they're doing it because their company, if they think they're going to get a promotion at their company because their company asked them to be on there. They're just checking the box. Your best board member is going to be someone who's passionate about your cause, is impacted by the services that you provide, and then Pacific Life can go in and support that employee who has developed that passion and serves on the board. And we do support employees who serve on nonprofit boards, but we don't go and place people on boards. But if an employee comes to me and asks, I'm really interested in this type of nonprofit, I'm interested in getting involved, then I'll make the connections and help do the outreach to get that employee connected to that nonprofit. So we don't shy away from it, but we don't actively promote it. And partly it's because of that underlying philosophy of what's right for the individual and what's right for the nonprofit.
Great. Does anyone have any other final questions before I hand this back over to Kevin and 1OC and Tennyson? Any final closing thoughts or statements for the group?
Well, there's a couple of questions here in here that I could just quickly kind of go through. If an organization has been funded 3 consecutive years, do we need to take a 2-year hiatus? So that might be a unique thing that we do versus other nonprofit funders, and we do it for 2 reasons. One is we want a nonprofit to go out and expand their fundee base. We want them to be able to not be reliant on Pacific Life funds every year. But also requiring a nonprofit to go on a 2-year off allows us to fund new nonprofits, allows us to go out and find other opportunities and other areas to fund. In any given year, we have about 100 nonprofits that we would normally fund that are having to be on this 2-year off requirement. And just think about that's 100 other nonprofits that we could actually be funding. And if we didn't have that program, they would be shut out because you get in the habit of just funding the same nonprofits and the same programs year after year. And this kind of allows us to get out of that habit. Is the grant request open or by invite? It's open. Anyone that fits those guidelines can apply between July 15th and August 15th. Again, as I said, that about $2 million out of the $7 million, that's kind of what our application grants are funded for. All of our other funding is directed by the community relations team and the foundation board versus kind of being a request that's open. And I guess the final, I'll just make one final comment before I turn it back over is I'm appreciative of what you do. And especially in this environment where you're having to cut costs and you're having to figure out what services can I continue to provide and having to battle for where's my next check going to come from to support the services. I feel for you. And I'm very appreciative for your willingness to power through it and continue to step up and provide the services. Now is the time when we need nonprofits the most, but now is also the time where nonprofits suffer the most because of the economy or not being able to deliver their services. So we are appreciative of what you do, and we as a company try our best to be able to support you through financial support and, when we can, the volunteer support to help you deliver your missions.
Thank you so much, Tennyson. Well, with that, I will hand the floor back over to Kevin.
Thanks so much, guys. What a wealth of knowledge and resource. I hope you guys found that incredibly valuable. There's so much happening right now and so much change, and I'll just kind of echo what Tennyson said. We just want to say thank you for the good work you guys are doing as you've had to adjust and have all hands on deck for what is now 5 months. So thank you guys for everything that you're doing. I did want to make you aware of one more opportunity that I forgot to mention and was thinking through. We are actually offering a fundraising cohort that we're doing at 1OC in partnership with another organization, MK Cares Consulting. And it's really going to be around, it's a 10-week cohort for fundraising professionals around redeveloping your fundraising strategy and fundraising structure in the midst of everything going on. And so it'll be weekly for 10 weeks with some coaching sessions in between to address your specific fundraising needs or gaps or challenges or barriers you're facing as you guys are looking to secure new funding opportunities moving forward. So you guys all have my email. We're still just collecting interest at this point. It's going to launch the first week of October. So if that's of interest, I should have mentioned that in the beginning, but if that's of interest to anyone, I definitely would encourage you to shoot me an email and I can forward you more details about that. But with that, we are almost at our time. This was recorded, so if you guys want to listen back to it, or, you know, Tennyson covered a lot of information, which was really rich and really helpful, but I'll send this recording out to you guys, to everyone that registered, in case you want to go back and listen to it. But that's pretty much all we have for today. We still have a few minutes. I want to give you one last chance. Does anyone have any final lingering questions? If so, go ahead and throw those in the chat box. All good. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Tennyson, Taryn, Terry, thank you so much for your guys' time. We really appreciate it, and excited to move forward. And hopefully you guys found this incredibly valuable, and we'll continue, you know, applying, submitting opportunities with Pacific Life. So thank you guys, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Have a great one.